to be here today with each of you to discuss a really prominent issue that is impacting our youth, our families, and communities across the country. We just heard about online safety and some of the threats that children may encounter in the digital world. And we're going to use this panel to talk about the trends and practical strategies for K-12 communities in this space. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and dive into our first question. In 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received 36 million reports of child sexual abuse material online. With this growing threat, what are the most important things you would want parents, teachers, school leaders, and students to know about how to best operate safely in the online world? And what should students, parents, and K-12 communities know about if they are a victim of child sexual exploitation abuse? Stacy, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. So, I think one of the most important things for parents, schools, school officials to be aware of is just how critical it is to have those conversations about online safety. You mentioned the 36 million reports that have been made to the cyber tip line. And within that, we're seeing trends like over the past 3 years, a 300% increase in online enticement reports. We're also starting to see reports related to AI and deepfakes. And so we know that there are threats out there online that are evolving and that are certainly making their way into schools. And we also know that from a prevention standpoint, the most effective programs and the most effective prevention education strategy is when kids are hearing these messages in multiple locations, when it's a whole community that's really coming together. So having conversations at home, but also making space for those conversations at school. So one of the things that we recommend is to make sure that you're seeking out prevention resources that have support for both the content and the education for kids, but also the adults that are in the position of providing that messaging. So the NetSmarts program that the National Center provides has both resources, animation for kids, and as well as discussion guides for the adults. So they're getting background information that can help them, as well as online training and other resources that make it possible for them to feel a little bit more comfortable stepping into that space. And then for victims in particular, I think there are really two things that are important for them to know. One is that it's not their fault. I think that has to be an important part of the response that they're hearing if they come and disclose to a trusted adult in that space that something has happened to them. And then also that there's help out there, because I think that we're seeing in some of these cases sometimes very serious outcomes because kids are fearful of seeking help or unaware that there are resources out there. So making sure that they know that there are steps that they can take, whether it's reporting to the cyber tip line, seeking support from law enforcement, using resources like Take It Down, which is a service that we provide that helps remove nude or sexual images of children online. I think as long as they know that you're there for them, that it's not their fault, and that there's help out there, it can have a huge impact on positive outcomes for those kids.
PTA, we believe in a three-prong approach: positive, proactive, and practical. Positive, and that creating fear and shame doesn't change behavior among kids or adults. So we want to take a positive approach in how we do this. Proactive, obviously, we want to get ahead of it. We don't want to wait until there is an incident or a negative outcome with a device or an online situation to start to have these conversations with kids. We encourage families to have proactive conversations before even putting a device in their child's hand, because deciding when a child has a device is definitely a family decision, because it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. So we have to be proactive in making sure that kids have this information and that they understand by having a device, they need to, look for these things and tell their parent or an adult. And then continuing to have open dialogue is super important. And the practical, we need to meet families where they are. It's like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. PTA recognizes that there are many factors that a family is considering when they decide to give their child a device or allow them certain online access. And we want to help move that needle toward a healthier and safer digital habits online, and to be practical at the same time for families. And we all know that as parents, it's so important to review our personal examples. And, I'm sure everyone's guilty of this. We got to model good behavior. So, how we use our technology, we have to set the example because kids follow what adults do, especially the younger kids, right? So, there's a great benefit in having expectations of ourselves to promote good digital habits and model for them.
I'll
I
add on
think
to that as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of resources that parents can use to fit what works for their family. Our agency just launched the Know to Protect campaign. We also have which is a public policy campaign that's for everyone. And then we also have something called Project iGuardian, where special agents go to schools and educate kids on how to remain safe online. But I think ultimately, you kind of have to go to the old school rule that I think we all has as kids, where our parents didn't let us talk to strangers and encourage us not to talk to strangers. And I think we kind of lose sight of that, but like the digital access allows kids to talk to strangers. So I think kind of implementing that old school rule will keep kids a lot safer. So like in my house, my kid can't play online with kids we haven't met. Can't talk to people that we haven't met as parents. And as he gets older, we're going to encourage that. And that one rule will keep a lot of kids safe. I think also too, from a law enforcement perspective, if you do end up in a situation where you are being abused or taken advantage of by a predator, the most important things are to disengage, and then tell a parent or trusted adult. And then that parent or trusted adult needs to go to law enforcement to help us find who those predators are, because they will keep going and keep preying on children until we stop them. So disengage, don't tell them that you're going to report them to law enforcement, just stop. They'll probably move on, unfortunately, to other victims, and give us the ability to have those devices and have those accounts to try and locate them and stop them.
The three-pronged approach that Yvonne was talking about, we incorporate that as well into our program, but we use the idea of stop, think, act. So every time we go online, we stop and look at what it is that we see on our screen. Then we think about what it is that we're looking at. Is what I'm looking at helpful, positive, necessary? Is it true? Is it something that I want linked to my name for the rest of my life if I decide to comment on it or share it or post it elsewhere? And then once we stop and think, then we act. And one of the most important messages we send to children, as well as the adults in their lives, is sometimes that action is to put the device down and walk away. We don't need to interact with every single post, comment, meme, GIF that we see online. Not everything is worthy of our energy and attention. And speaking to what Tim was saying regarding not allowing children to interact with strangers, we have the same policy in our house, but unfortunately, because of the child's brain not being fully developed, in their world, if they've made contact with somebody, even if they've never met this person face to face, well, in their mind, they're no longer a stranger, right? They're a friend. If we've started this conversation, there's now a relationship that's being formed. So it's absolutely crucial that as parents and guardians and engaged adults, that we are fully aware of the different apps that our children are interacting on. Maybe we even have a presence on these apps, if it's social media, if it's gaming. I encourage parents to game with their kids, to have a social media account with their kids. It's meeting your kids where they are, rather than trying to pull them out, which only makes them resist more and want to act out more. And finally, regarding what was said about Take It Down, which I think is an amazing program that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is promoting. We also do want to remember that once something is put out there, it's out there forever. We can try to do our best to take any type of inappropriate material down and get rid of it, but we don't know where it's been shared, who now has access to it, or what's been done with that particular piece of material. So we need to just remember there's no way to ever know if it's completely taken down.
Thank you all. We're going to move into our next question. So according to a 2024 study by the National Center for Educational Statistics, 37% of middle school students and 25% of high school students reported being cyberbullied at school or away from school at least once a week. In your experience, what are the most effective resources, tools, and evidence-based strategies that schools are currently using to help the K-12 community better identify and manage cyberbullying? Yvonne, I'd love to start with you on this one, if I may.
Thank you so much for that question. You know, bullying is like an epidemic now. I'm going to share a personal story. So many years ago, when I was the state president in Delaware, I worked with our attorney general to get more, laws around bullying, really working with the state to make sure that school districts were really taking this seriously. And he made a statement that has stayed with me for years. This probably was 20 years ago. He said, when we were kids, and we are older, so you were on the playground on a Friday, you were bullied. By the time Monday came, everybody forgot about it. But even 20 years ago, it was recognized that with being online and with social media, bullying gets exasperated. So over a weekend, by the time the child gets back to school on Monday, it's 10 times worse. And whether it's online or in person, it is a top concern for parents and guardians. It's a pervasive problem. National PTA conducted a survey this past summer where most parents, 60% of them, reported that they would like guidance or support when it comes to helping to keep their child safe online, especially parents of elementary school. 64% of parents indicated in this survey that they would want support having resources shared with their children to help with online safety. So having the resources, but also, obviously, giving them to the children. And over 8 in 10 parents reported that they would be at least somewhat interested in guidance on what mental health services are available to help with this issue, because we can't ignore the fact that it's connected. Most parents report that they're likely to go into their child's school, go to the counselor, the teacher, some kind of place, and choose these resources respectively so that they would be able to help their children. National PTA has an initiative, and it's called PTA Connected. We're very, very proud of this program. Through this program, we strive to help children act safely, responsibly, and thoughtfully online. Through this initiative, we are focused on deepening the understanding and knowledge of parents, families, and teachers about digital safety tools and resources. It is so important to National PTA and across the country that parents are educated and encouraged to have dialogue to help their children in this area. We have trainings and we offer grants to help our parents and our local PTAs to be able to have these conversations, not just within their schools, but in their communities. Parents need help. They want support, but they also need support from lawmakers and government agencies. Circling back to what I just started with when I was sharing my story, we have to all work together to develop better tools for our children, make sure that there's digital wellness and digital citizenship skills for children and youth, educators and families to help our youth act safely online.
I'd love to jump in here. I'm Dr. Michael Breggy. I'm the superintendent for the Beverly Hills Unified School District in Beverly Hills, California. And I really want to piggyback off what was just said about kind of working together, because even in this Zoom, you can see that there's tons of resources and we're all experts in different areas, but it truly is about bringing it all together. I think having consequences for and really good, clear policies are important, but it only means something if you work with those policies and you actually have parents that come into your schools, working with your PTAs. Having that in a binder or online on your website is certainly not going to help you. Just knowing that you have consequences. You have to really explain, you have to engage people, kids, in what the consequences are for this type of behavior, which goes along with some other things you've heard today, which is just the education behind what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I think what I found is, this is my 14th year as a superintendent, is that we're really rich when it comes to the types of resources that we have, but it is that pulling together that's a problem. We have very good policies about our phones are off and they're put away during the school day, which has really helped a lot, especially for the cyberbullying that's happening while you're on a school campus. And that's really helped. But what's really changed for us is, a long time ago, we used to be able to say, look, if it happened outside of school, you need to handle that. But what happens now is if the cyberbullying and that's happening outside of school, which it is happening outside of school more than it is inside of school, is that does become our problem because that student enters our doors in the morning on a Monday, and that educational environment is impacted not only by that student, but by the perpetrator or the victim, and then all the friends that are involved. So, people will wonder, why are there so many administrators these days in our schools? Well, that's one of the reasons, because doing the investigations are very long, they're arduous. You're having to collect phones from kids to find out what actually happened. And really what we're finding is the hard part for us is that there's a lot of finger pointing going on. And so it's like, oh, you're the school, you should handle that because all the schools, all the students are there in the school. But what's really missing for us, and the part that we're trying to do in our school district is reach out to the parent as well to say, look, we got you. We're going to help you just like we are with the student. But we don't have parent talking to parent. So it's everyone's kind of coming through us, and then to do an investigation is very lengthy. And what's not happening is parents that reach out, they know families that are involved, but nobody's picking up the phone. And they're saying, hey, look, can you help me? This is what I'm hearing, that your child was involved in this. And what do you know about what's going on? A lot of it's just kind of like, oh, you're going to go ahead and take care of it. So I just want to just focus on that point, is that there's great things happening out there as far as resources and tools, but it's pulling them all together. It's not your job or our job or their job. It's all of our jobs.
Fantastic. So we're going to go to our next question here. The dangerous and malicious misuse of AI is a growing and complicated threat for schools. Can you share what you are seeing in this area, and what steps can K-12 schools take to anticipate and prevent AI-based threats? And can you also touch a bit on what support should be in place for those that are the victims of these incidents? Dr. Breggy, I'd like to start with you on this one.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we were certainly a victim of a recent case with AI in our school district. And these things happen so quickly, overnight, actually. And when we had 14, 15 students that were coming in at our middle school, and they were talking about how there were deep fakes that were made with placing their head on the nude bodies of created images, and how detrimental that has been to our students. I mean, it first started out with that, our students were thinking, why was I selected to do that? Why was I the one that was singled out? For what reason? And when more and more students started to share that they had seen these pictures online, that's when an investigation started. And what we're finding is that, again, a lot of the things during the school day, our students are issued a one-to-one device, like most students around the country, that it's not happening in our schools on our computers, because we do have filters, we do have protections in place. But what's happening is outside of class again. And so that can be really detrimental. A group of people can get together and start creating images. And that's allowed to happen because there's absolutely no regulation at all to the AI industry when it comes to kids and ages and what they can do and they can do that to. And so I would really promote, because we're certainly doing this. I've traveled to Washington twice. We're working with our lawmakers because we have to have something regulated. As important as it is when we have regulations about smoking, or we have regulations about driving, we know what's safe to drive. But there's nothing out there to say this is what's safe for kids to have access to. And without any type of regulation, we're kind of the guinea pigs here. This is happening. And it was said earlier, we have tools and stuff to take things down, and we try to, we're going to help you, and we've got programs in place. But once that happens to a student who is always going to wonder in their mind, will this ever resurface again? And so we've got great connections with our local police department, with our parents and our PTAs. And now we're taking it a step further, because if we don't protect the students in our school district, who will? I mean, this is just the beginning, how easy it is to take images off of somebody's Snapchat or somebody's Instagram. And you need about 14, 15, 16 pictures that you can get off public sites to help create these images. And it truly is pornographic. And it's absolutely incredibly, we victimized kids at such an early age because people have this ability to create things that look real. And so we've got the programs in place. We have great policies in place, but we really have to teach kids about what does this feel like to do to somebody else. We know that with our consequences, because we've expelled kids for this action, which is very severe for middle school students. But for people to understand the gravity of this, the weight of making this decision is incredibly important to know that this suicides, that the self-esteem of a student that doesn't want to come to school anymore, the power that a group of kids can have by creating these deep fake images of staff or of their classmates is absolutely devastating. And the last thing I'll say is, other than having really good policies, having good relationships, good programs, parents working together is a really good restorative way to meet with your kids. Because when we looked at the people that did this, the perpetrators that did this, there were no behavior issues with any of these students. So this group of middle school boys, you would think, like I thought, okay, I've heard the names, I probably know who they are. They are not the people that you would think that would be the kids that would be doing this. And so providing really good restorative measures, we had these group of boys that were expelled, that they're able to come back now if they met all of the requirements, was to work with our city, to work with people that are in some sort of sexual trauma, like so that they could understand from somebody else's perspective, what does this actually feel like to see naked pictures of yourself online, and what that victim has to go through to try to pull it together to come back and then be a friend and a citizen and a daughter. And we have our kids that have made these mistakes go through those restorative measures, because there's no way to understand what it's like to be a victim unless you're a victim.
I want to add on to that, if I may. I'm very fortunate to work with the task force commander of the San Diego Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And I know that with the onset of AI, there is a huge concern that we're going to see a major uptick in sextortion as a result. And sextortion has already become its own pandemic with our young people across this country. We've lost way too many of our kids to this. So on the preventative side, which again is what I really master in, is the idea of making sure as parents and guardians that we're aware of age restrictions when it comes to things like social media. 13 is the minimum age to have a social media account. Not creating accounts under our names as parents for our children, making sure we have the strongest privacy settings we possibly can for our accounts, and that our kids do so as well. I am also a huge advocate for telling kids at the end of the day, give your devices to me. They don't go into your room with you at night alone, unsupervised, because that's where a lot of this dangerous stuff is happening. But one of the most important things we can do as parents is being open, calm, and responsive to these tough topics that do come up. And as parents, also recognizing we've used the term child pornography in years past regarding sexual material that's put out there about our children. And we've recently kind of changed that narrative to now use the phrase child sexual abuse material, because what we need to remember is the child is being abused in these instances. This isn't pornography in a titillating sense. It's dangerous. This is harming our kids. But if we as parents can look at this child sexual abuse material and say to our children, you can talk to me about this. If something has come up that has your image or an image of somebody you know, and it's come across your device or somebody has talked to you about it, that you are receptive, calm, and non-judgmental about this. So many kids are afraid of going to their parents for two major reasons. They're afraid of being judged and getting in trouble. And the biggest thing is they're afraid of having their device taken away. That's almost a bigger punishment than anything else a kid can think of. So being that source of comfort and open dialogue with your kids and using the proper vocabulary, using the word sextortion, using the word sexual abuse material, using the words enticement, having that same vocabulary with your kids so we know exactly what it is that they're talking about and we know how to approach law enforcement with this. The other big thing I know we talk about in our program, if somebody is bullying you or enticing you or using material about you, to block that person, block any type of communication you might have with that person. But it's so important to know to not delete anything that is posted or sent to you, because you will need that when you go to law enforcement to report this behavior. So it's so important to keep documentation of this, even though you may block that interaction with that user.
Can I just say, add one more thing to that, because I think that it was so well articulated. Even our kids that are making really good decisions, however, is without any regulation at all. The kids are being added back into these conversations. So you have your very, very best children, your best students who say, this is not for me. I don't want to be part of this conversation. And then they leave the conversation. But in Snapchat is the worst at this, is that they will add you back to the conversation and they'll find another way and pull you back. Even so, these are students that have made the best decision because this is completely unregulated.
So I'll just add that when you're talking about unregulated, this is where we have to have these serious conversations with the lawmakers. They have to do something. I mean, AI is not going away. It does give great technology for children to learn, and we want to promote that. But just like you teach a child to look both ways before they cross the street, we need to impress upon children before you take that step, before you delete whatever, think about it first. It's almost the same analogy. And I think that it's shocking. I mean, there are laws around digital safety. I'm sure that everyone knows, COSA and COPA and all of these things that are very important. National PTA, we adopted a position statement on social media and all around the education and how important it is to have these conversations. Families talking to other families, all of those important things are in our position statement. But we also we have this position statement so that we can go to our lawmakers. So our members, we have 3 million of them, can go to lawmakers and say, we need to do more. And so we can't all be working in silos, right? We all have to work together for a common goal, which is to get more regulation. It's shocking that AI, sort of came to me, it was like all of a sudden you can't do a search on Facebook, right, without it coming up or something. And it seemed like it came out of almost nowhere. And now it's everywhere and it's scary, but it can also be a positive thing as long as it's regulated. So this is how we can all work together by contacting our lawmakers and saying, we need to take action and make sure that our kids are not just, it's youth, it's everyone. It's K through 12 students, even college students. Everyone needs to have protection from this. So that's where PTA comes, our perspective.
I'd also like to speak to this a little bit. So for the National Center, this is definitely a big concern. It's something that we started tracking this past year in terms of reports made to the cyber tip line that involved AI or generative AI. And, last year, I think there were about 4,700 reports, which is not that big in the grand scheme of the number of reports we have, but I think we're going to see a huge increase in that because it is something that has onset quickly. And as these, different resources have become more available and accessible, more talked about, more popular. I mean, there's, trends around, things that can nudify or take an image of a fully clothed person and make it naked, or other ways to create from completely innocuous imagery content that is sexualized. And I appreciate the points that have been made about how harmful that is. So our perspective on that is that AI generated child sexual abuse material is still child sexual abuse material. The harm that the child, their family experiences is very real and lasting, and it has, potential consequences for them. And I think that, one of the things that has really become apparent as a result of this, and this was always true, but that when a child is experiencing a circumstance where an image of them is being circulated, that lack of judgment and response is even more important, because it's possible that they may have had no knowledge of the image even being created. And certainly there should have been no judgment regardless. But I think that what is important about that for the adults who might be responding to these situations is just to remember even more so that when they are responding, at least in that initial response, it almost doesn't matter how the image was created. What matters is how that child is feeling about it, what they're experiencing as a result of it, and making sure that they have the support and referral to resources that they need in order to take steps forward, to feel empowered, to take control back a little bit in that situation. And, some of those details about how or who and all of that becomes part of the process down the road. But initially, I think what would be helpful in responding to these and making sure that the best outcomes are being had for kids is just making sure that they don't feel that judgment, making sure that they know that whoever they're talking to is going to be there to support them. So I think part of that is making sure that the adults in those situations feel supported as well. So again, I would just advocate for making sure that when you are implementing resources, prevention resources, that it's including content that's good for kids, but also helpful for adults, that provides some of that education. Because I think, some of those details about AI are not something that someone may feel ready to address or talk about. So when it comes to using some of that correct terminology, making sure that there's help to make adults feel prepared to do that. And that is true whether it's a parent having a conversation at home, or whether it's, school leaders or teachers trying to implement programs or address these and have these types of conversations with kids in the school.
Can I just say, I mean, we're really clear on a lot of this, and which I love, but it's what gets lost in the bureaucracy. Part of this is with your lawmakers and free speech, and it's going to take somebody to die, and we are not moving as fast as we should be. I mean, even in our local communities. So, with our police departments, and, they're having to still make a decision because, they'll ask the question, has a crime been committed? Of course, that's what they're supposed to ask. But when you don't consider those images to be pornographic, not every community is looking at this the same way. And so then that way, if a police department doesn't look at it and say that these are pornographic images because they've been created through AI, even though you can't tell and nobody knows, and to that victim, they've been victimized, then there's no arrests. So it's even hard to get on the consequence part when everyone is still not defining things the same way on whether that's pornographic or not.
Tim, I think you were going to weigh in here as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really important education wise. I know a lot of us have talked about sextortion, and that is unfortunately becoming a bigger trend. And I think with generative AI, it's going to become really bad because that is just kind of spinning up. Bad guys are going to be able to use it to solicit images from our kids, pretending they're a girl or a boy of the same age as the victims. And they'll also be able to generate images of victims and say, I'm going to send this out if you don't pay me. And we're starting to see that happening from foreign countries. Criminals are doing that. They're targeting U.S. children from a foreign country. So the consequences, I mean, we are arresting people in foreign countries, but it does take a lot more resources and time. And I think we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this, unfortunately. So kids have to know that if they are being sextorted, they need to tell a parent. They need to disengage immediately, because unfortunately, there's no good outcome with child sexual abuse material, but some of our worst outcomes are related to sextortion with self-harm and some other really bad stuff. So kids need to know that if they are a victim of this, to tell adults, to get help, and also look for ways to avoid ending up in these situations.
And I do think I agree with the idea that this is something where legislation is catching up a little bit to this trend, but also technology. I think that, technology is creating this problem, and GAI or AI in general has been said, a lot of positive applications. But as we're marching forward from a technology perspective in creating and giving access to these things, there also are technology solutions to help prevent these tools from being used for some of these purposes. And so I think making sure that we're advocating for progress on the legislative front, progress on technology solutions, as well as prevention messaging that can, start happening now. It's, going to take a multi-pronged approach to find solutions.
Well, thank you all for this incredibly productive conversation. I know as a mother of two young children, it's so important. I think some of the key themes that I heard throughout the discussion was engaging our students, engaging our children, and having that dialogue, raising awareness of parents on the apps and games that our children are interacting with, deepening the knowledge of our parents of the resources that exist. And the best practices that exist in this space, including many of the resources and many of the strategies you all talked about today, increasing our digital citizenship and wellness amongst our youth, and then working together collaboratively, not working in silos on this, taking that whole community and collaborative approach, and then having our parents work together are just some of the key things. And I want to say thank you all again for the time. This is such an important topic, and really appreciate you all sharing your collective experiences and your expertise here. So thank you, guys.